tuned for a quick update on the Bf-108 project. All right, everybody, Paul Stecewycz here with Weeks Aircraft and Fantasy Flight, doing a quick update on the Bf-108 project. In the last episode, we talked about stripping all the paint off the rear section of the fuselage, and now, of course, we have worked from that point and gone forward and basically got almost all the paint off the fuselage, except for the underside. Of course, that's going to be kind of difficult to do. We're not going to chemical strip that because nobody wants to lay on their back and try to slop on chemical strippers. So at some point, we will probably plastic media the underneath of the airplane. But about 90% of the paint is off the aircraft at this point. And of course, like the old saying goes, paint hides many sins. That's what we were finding out on the 108. Now, of course, in some other episodes, we talked about this particular area here that we had some concern about. Well, now that we have all the paint off, we kind of see what is happening here, where this is some rough skin. It's a little bumpy here, and there's a repair that somebody actually put, a reinforcement repair they actually riveted behind here. That's what this set of rivets is right here. It's in this rectangular pattern. So I think kind of what happened to this airplane, it's coming more clear to me, probably exactly what happened to this aircraft, was that it was in a ground loop incident. Now, a ground loop, if you don't know what that is, usually involves an airplane that is a tailwheel aircraft. Tailwheel airplanes tend to be somewhat unstable on the ground sometimes once they touch down. And what will happen with a ground loop is it'll start pulling the wing down, and the airplane will kind of start spinning around where it's like a little bit out of control. When that happens, basically you're kind of along for the ride. If you've gotten it to that point and you can't get it back, you're going to spin this thing around and cause some damage. A lot of times you can be lucky. If you're on a grass runway, you can have a ground loop and spin it around. You have no damage at all. But if you're on pavement, it can cause some issues. Or if you end up spinning around and hitting something or stopping into something, that can cause some real issues. And I think what happened with this airplane is it had a ground loop, and it then, instead of just sliding off the runway, it either hit something that made it stop kind of suddenly. And that's what caused some of these issues. And I think this is what happened right here. This skin right here got a little wrinkle in it. And I think that's what they were trying to do here, is kind of reinforce that. So what we're going to have to do here is probably go in here and cut this out and put in a proper flush repair. Now, of course, there's some other issues that this caused on the other side of the airplane, which we're going to talk about. But as you can see, paint's all off. It was pretty difficult. The back side had a lot of paint and some filler. We thought the front side was going to be similar, but as we got actually more and more forward, there was actually more filler than there was on the back of the tail. I'm talking like heavy filler in areas that was hiding some interesting things. So we got it all off, though. It took a lot of time. Actually, from this point forward is probably almost 2 weeks worth of scrubbing and stripper and lacquer thinner and just kind of just digging it all off the airplane. But as you can see, it's all clean. But let's go check out the other side of the airplane and see some of the issues we found on that side. All right, everybody, we're on the right side of the 108 fuselage, and I'm going to show you a couple things here. Of course, we've got all the paint removed just like the other side. We even got the paint removed off of this wing fairing right here, which is actually riveted to the airplane. This is actually magnesium. So this piece had to be actually stripped mechanically using a Scotch-Brite pad and a grinding wheel to get it off, because you can't actually use stripper on magnesium. It'll actually eat it. It's acidic, and magnesium does not like anything that's heavily acidic like a paint stripper. So we had to manually scrub all that off. So that came off really nice. But on this side, of course, we're talking about after we got the paint off, what we're finding, and we talked about the little bit of damage on that side, and we also found this area right here. This is another little area where it has a tiny bit of like a little caved-in spot on the skin. I think this was associated with this accident that it had. Not sure what we're going to do right here. This is kind of a bad spot to figure out. This piece actually comes off. This is a panel that actually holds first aid kit, and there's actually a little compartment in there for that. And you can actually reach back in here and get to the back side of this, which might aid us in doing some type of repair or trying to work this out a little bit so it's not quite as dished in as you see here. But again, finding things like all over the airplane here. But hopefully nothing too bad, nothing that's going to stop the airplane, of course, from flying again, just little issues that we have to take care of. There's one more spot on the forward part of the fuselage we want to talk about, and then from there we're going to talk about the instrument panel and the instruments, and also the last piece that has to go off to the upholstery shop that we just finished up. All right, we're going to talk about some other little issues we found on the airplane after we got all the paint off, and of course that's the forward section here on the right hand side. And of course when this airplane had this incident, some of what stressed out the airplane, of course, goes through the landing gear. If this thing would have ground looped and the landing gear would have got caught on something or hit a ditch or something, there would have been some stress on the gear. And we know that for a fact because there's actually some damage up inside the wheel well here, which actually was never repaired. They actually just continued to fly the airplane with that damage. But along with that, of course, that kind of impact stressed a little bit up here also. And remember, you have a lot of mass out here. You have the engine that's connected. So when this sudden stop happened, the engine probably moved a little bit. And what happened is it did a little bit of damage here, and that explains these two repairs. There's actually a patch that was placed here and a patch that was put here. None of this was visible. It was all covered up with filler and paint. So when we got it off, we were kind of surprised to see this. But I think what happened is the engine kind of pulled. It probably came in here and did a little wrinkle here, and also probably did some damage right here where the actual engine mount attaches to this forged steel piece, because this actually was cut out and a repair was made in here. Now we have to take a closer look at that and see if that's something we can retain or maybe replace that whole piece and start over again. But you'll see that that is kind of what we figured out. The true story of what happened to this airplane is coming to light after we got all the paint off of it. But again, nothing that's going to stop the airplane from continuing on. And hopefully we don't find any more surprises. We've gotten done through all the paint stripping. We found the surprises on the wings, and now on the fuselage we kind of know what we got. We know what we have to do. Some interesting things also along the way on the fuselage. There's all these little screw heads, little tiny little slotted screws that are actually dimpled and flush. These were all filled. They were actually filled at the factory. And what these do is they actually hold in all the conduit and electrical pieces and different things inside the airplane. So to actually rewire the airplane, you actually have to remove the paint to get to these screws, pull all the wiring out and everything. Then I have to rewire the airplane before we paint it, because I have to put all these screws back to hold all these clamps on, because then these again get filled and then it gets painted. So it's interesting that they'd actually just went through the side of the airplane, but there's a few on this side. There's a whole bunch on the other side because most of the electrical wiring runs down the left side of the airplane. So all that's going to have to come out. Another interesting thing on this side of the airplane is the little scoop here. This is actually fresh air scooped for the pilot and the passengers. There's actually two little vents on the instrument panel, and basically this is just fresh air that came in. There's a series of little tubes that go on and connect to those openings. This piece is actually a surprise. I thought this was going to be damaged or been re-welded because of this little incident here, but that's in good shape, so no issues there. But again, very happy that we at least got it this far as getting all the paint off of it. It was a struggle, like of course the wings were, but we are making steady progress here. And of course, before we actually stripped this forward portion, I wanted to pull the instrument panel out of the airplane because I didn't want to get any chemical stripper on any of that. So let's go talk about the instrument panel and what we do with these instruments to get them overhauled. Right, we're going to talk about the instrument panel and also the instruments that we pulled out of the airplane. This is the panel right here, which is now actually emptied. All the instruments have been removed from the instrument panel and they have been boxed up and shipped out, but we did get some pictures and some footage of the instruments before we sent them off. This is kind of what they look like. I have a series of a few German instruments, which are pretty rare actually. The American instruments you find, there are a lot of them out there. There's a lot of them surplus after the war. You could probably pick up a surplus American instrument from World War II for 50, 60 bucks. When it comes to the German stuff though, it's a little bit difficult and sometimes hard to find, and you're gonna pay $200 to $300, maybe $400 for a new old stock or even an old instrument. But this particular airplane had all of its instruments in it. It had some instruments that were specific to the airplane. And of course, we have to send these out to get them rebuilt because we don't know if they still function. You don't want to put an old instrument in the aircraft and find out it doesn't work once you start flying. So of course, once the panel is taken out, just see right here, we have to send them off to an overhaul shop. Now with the American instruments, it's not that big of a deal because there's a number of shops that do that. But with the German instrument, not too many. And I talked to some people in Germany, and there were some places over there that actually overhauled the instruments. And I was going to send them to Germany, but then somebody told me, be very careful about that, or don't even do that, because what's going to happen is the package is going to get flagged through customs. Now people ask, well, why is that? Well, a lot of people don't realize is that a lot of aircraft from the 1930s and 40s, the way they would light up the instruments, so if you flew the aircraft at nighttime, they actually put radium on the dials and the numbers, and you had like a fluorescent light or a different type of light inside the cockpit, and that would actually make the radium glow, and that's how you would see the instrument if you were night flying. Well, guess what? Radium is radioactive. So if you put a bunch of these in a box and you send them through customs and this thing gets flagged, guess what's going to happen? They're going to confiscate the box and you're not going to get it back. So everybody said don't do that, and actually I talked to a number of people, and somebody gave me a suggestion of a company in Washington State, actually called AirTech Instruments, who actually I think just finished and did all the instruments for the Paul Allen Flying Heritage Collection ME-262 that's getting ready to fly. So I gave them a call, told them what I had, and they were like pretty excited about it. I said, yeah, we can do all that for you. So took them all out of the panel, boxed them up, and they're going to overhaul the instruments. Now again, this is going to be pretty pricey because sometimes they have to actually remove the radium. They may have to redo the dial if it's not right, or redo the face of the instrument. You're going to expect to pay anywhere from $500, maybe $600 per instrument to have it overhauled, and there are 10 instruments in the airplane. So we're going to probably get a bill around $5,000 to $6,000 to get all these overhauled. But excited I found somebody that would do it here in the States, so I don't have to ship them overseas. Another quick thing is the panel itself. This is the original panel that came out of the airplane. I want to reuse it. It's got a couple issues here, but I think I can save it. One of the odd things about this panel is that this piece right here, this instrument that was in here was actually a directional gyro or a DG indicator, but it was actually an American instrument, and everything else was German. So I'm very confused by that. So I took this piece off and I cleaned the paint off it to see if this was like a homemade piece. And it doesn't. It actually looks original. It looks like a factory-made piece. So I'm thinking maybe that was actually original to the airplane. I'm not sure, but I'm going to do a little bit more research. But if it is, I'm just going to retain that, even though it is a little strange. It is original to this particular airplane. So I'm going to have that instrument overhauled too, along with all the German instruments. Hopefully the panel can be cleaned up. A couple things have to be done to it, little repairs. And hopefully we'll just repaint it, put the instruments back in, and reinstall it. So kind of gives you an idea of, again, a lot of time that goes into that, the cost to have instruments overhauled, and also the danger with the radium dials and trying to get all this done correctly without getting the instruments confiscated. So last thing we're going to talk about is one of the last pieces that we have to take to the upholstery shop. We talked over the past episodes about the seats and the rear seat wood frame that we had to do. I just finished the back support for the rear seat, and it's a good example of how everything comes together because I finished the piece just yesterday. So let's go take a look at that. All right, the last thing we're going to talk about is one of the last pieces that we need to get ready for the upholster, and that is the back support piece for the rear seat. Now, we talked about the actual seat itself, which is the wooden framework that I think we talked about it in the last episode, that had to be all taken apart, re-glued, and repaired. The piece that goes with that, of course, is the rear support piece. And this piece, I think we took some video of it also. It's actually a magnesium skin with aluminum structure. And this is a perfect example of how it all comes together. Now, this piece went through its paint stripping, it went through its corrosion control, the special treatment that we had to do for the magnesium skin, all that was done. And then, of course, repainted in the proper, what I call the Messerschmitt gray, which we had matched to some of the original painting in the airplane. And then going back together again. Now you see some of these wood strips here. These are all the original wood strips that came out of it. They were all in good condition. I cleaned those off, sanded them, put some fresh varnish on them. What these pieces are for is, this is where the upholstery is actually attached. It's actually on this side and it wraps around, and it actually had little nails and tacks that held it in here. And that's why you see all these little holes here. These are the original holes from the original upholstery that was on it. So able to save all those pieces. Those are all installed, reinstalled with the original screws that came out. I was able to actually get all the screws out without damaging them. So I used those back again, trying to use as much of the original airplane as possible. And then, of course, the next thing we talked about in some of the other episodes, plating. And there's the seat belts for this rear seat are attached to this piece. So, of course, those pieces were taken out of the airplane. They were blasted and sent for CAD plating, we talked about earlier. And then, of course, what attaches the seat belts to that is the little triangular ring that the seat belt attaches to. And those, of course, went through the chrome plating that we talked about in another episode. Now, of course, what attaches to that is the seat belt itself, which is this is one of the pieces right here. And actually, this is an opportunity to kind of give a shout out to people. I'm actually trying to find somebody who can make this for us. We can't use it as it is. It's kind of wore out. It's a little rotted in areas. We can use the hardware over again, but I haven't been able to find anybody that's willing to undertake and make this piece. It's made out of leather. It's some heavy webbing material. I've talked to people that make horse harnesses and a few other things. Nobody seems to want to get involved in it. So if there's anybody out there that has any ideas, send us a message. But this is the seat belts. We want to use the original ones. They're really cool. They have these cool little attachments to make them buckle together. And basically, the seat belt just attaches to the ring. It just loops through this piece right here, and it comes back through. And all it does is just come back to this point. It goes underneath, and then it comes through the little teeth, and that's how it's attached. So now, of course, now we could put a modern belt on here, which I've seen some 108s that have some modern belts, but again, I mean, that's a really cool seat belt, and it really has a lot of character to it. So we want to try to have this redone, have all this steel stuff replated, and so when its upholstery is all finished, we can attach those brand new seat belts there and get it all done. So again, a good example, a perfect piece, all finished, ready to go to the upholstery, and when it gets back from there, it'll have all the nice blue leather attached to it. So making some progress. Again, slow. We're working a little bit more on it lately. The past couple months prior to last episode, didn't have a chance to do too much on the 108, but we did stick to it the past month and a half here, getting all the paint off the airplane. So that's the latest update on the 108, making steady progress, and hopefully check back in another month and a half, and we have another episode, and come check that out with us.